Tonight, the president touted the status quo, but acceptance of the current state of our nation is deeply out of touch with the hardships many Americans face. Record costs for goods, higher interest rates, a crisis at the southern border, a growing domestic energy crisis, a weakened foreign policy posture, and an influx of lethal fentanyl killing our youth at alarming rates. The economic policies of the last 2 years have made life unaffordable for many families. Unrestrained federal spending led to the highest inflation in decades. A harsh reality anyone who has gone to the grocery store or filled up their gas tank has encountered. Compared to this time 2 years ago, Idahoans are paying more than $800 per month just to keep up. Higher prices have wiped out wage gains, and higher interest rates have made it harder to buy a car, invest in a home, or save for the future. The United States recently hit its staggering spending cap of $31.4 trillion. Conversations about how the United States will continue to pay its bills on time and how we should budget for the future will rightly dominate the halls of Congress for the next few months. Now is the time for spending reform proposals to be put forward and debated. For the President to refuse to engage in discussions about how our federal government should live within its means is irresponsible. Both parties have a responsibility to do their part in good faith to find a bipartisan solution. We must address our growing deficits in order to put our country's finances on a sustainable path rather than continue down a road of more unsustainable taxing and spending.
Well, James Lankford here. The State of the Union just finished up. For those of you that got a chance to be able to watch it, you'll know because you got a chance to be able to see it live. For those of you that didn't, I would tell you if you go back and watch it, you'll hear exactly what socialism really sounds like. The president tonight promised we're going to have much higher taxes on every single company. We're going to try to compel companies to come back, but when they come back from overseas, we're going to dramatically increase their taxes. And we're going to actually get government involved from everything from the price of drugs to the price of your hotel to the price of your concert tickets. He went through and made all these promises. Everything that annoys you, government's going to get involved and they're going to actually fix it. So that was jarring, to be able to say the least, to be able to hear this long litany of here's new areas that the government's going to get involved in. He made a comment that in some ways made me laugh and caused a great rumble across the room. I don't know if you could hear it at home when he said, we're going to use oil at least for a decade. No one thinks we're going to only use oil for only a decade. Oil is going to be around for a long time because there's no way to do any kind of energy transition in the next decade. So literally what he's saying is we're going to use oil for a decade. That means all of us that have a gas-powered vehicle or a diesel-powered truck, 10 years from now, you're not going to be able to have that if it's based on what he was just saying. We're going to use oil for a decade. Again, there were some things like that that just had no connection on it. I was very surprised, quite frankly, and disappointed in many ways. His immigration conversation tonight, I think, was about 30 seconds. And he said two things. The first one was, pass my comprehensive immigration bill, which, by the way, if you haven't seen his comprehensive immigration bill, is full amnesty for everyone that's in the country illegally and a very open border. That's his comprehensive immigration plan. And the second thing he said was, if you'll just give me more money for technology, then that's going to solve the border. Well, clearly it's not going to solve the border. It's the policies that is actually put in place. I had Brandon Judd tonight as my guest at the State of the Union, who's the president of the Border Patrol Council. There are practical things that can be done right now to be able to secure the border. They're just choosing not to. He also made the comment about deficit reduction and said as president, he's reduced the deficit $1.7 trillion and made it sound like this big deal. Here's the backstory on that. Yes, the deficit has gone down on him because it's coming off of COVID. But the interesting thing is he actually tried to spend $5 trillion more than he spent. And Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema blocked him from that and dramatically reduced one of the bills that he had only to $1.5 trillion rather than $5.5 trillion. So he actually tried to dramatically increase spending even more. But then he took credit for him losing the fight, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin actually not voting for him in his $5 trillion bill. So it was hyperbole, to be able to say the least. Multiple other moments there in the room. I don't know if you could hear it at home, but at one point in the room, he turns and says, there are Republicans here that want to be able to end Social Security and end Medicare. There's a huge rumble across our side of the aisle because obviously this has been this hyperbole trope that he's tried to be able to pin on one person, that was Rick Scott, who has been clearly outspoken to say he's not trying to be able to end Social Security and Medicare, that he was taken out of context on a statement, but they continue to be able to run out this campaign statement and look at Republicans and say they're trying to end Social Security and try to end Medicaid, when that is absolutely not true. So there's this huge rumble in the room to be able to say, why do you do that? Why do you at one moment say you're a unifying president, in the next moment try to jump into things that just factually are not true? So there's a lot of that back and forth, and there was a lot of interaction within the audience tonight in that time. Obviously, the president's going to put his best foot forward and say that he's gotten all these great things that have accomplished. The American people will judge that in the days ahead. But there's been a tremendous amount of money that has been spent, and a dramatic increase in spending beyond COVID spending, because, again, last several years has been dramatic increase in spending for the emergency in COVID, but COVID was over when the President Biden actually came into office, and yet he wanted to dramatically increase spending on all these different programs. It's caused the inflation. It's caused the real problems that we have. Willing to work with the president, as I've said over and over again, on areas where we can find common ground, and there are things that must be done that we've got to be able to find common ground on. I was pleased to hear the president state that he's willing to be able to sit down and negotiate that. For the last 2 years, on the whole, the president's just run over half the country and has said your ideas don't matter. Now with the election that's happened in November, with the flip that's happened in the House of Representatives for this year and Republican control there, now the president has to sit down and be able to negotiate. One last thing. The president talked about the debt ceiling issue and said that the debt ceiling just has to be increased with no conversation about it. I adamantly disagree. We're at $31.5 trillion. This has always been my position. If we're not trying to change the status quo, if we're not trying to change the trajectory of where we are in our spending, we should sit down and do that even around a debt ceiling time. This is not about putting America's faith and credit on the line, but this is about trying to not just have a short-term gain and a long-term loss. This is also long-term, that we've got to be able to stabilize our spending. If we don't get control of this now, there's no turning around. $31.5 trillion and accelerating is a major problem that we should actually have real conversation to be able to address. So adamantly disagree with the president saying just raise the debt ceiling and just keep going and ignore the debt. That's not the way that it needs to be able to go. We've got to be able to actually restore some fiscal sanity into the process. So let's sit down, let's talk it out, and let's work these things out together. Again, the president had missed some good opportunities to be able to outline some of the plan for what he's going to do to be able to actually deal with issues like the economy and how he's going to deal with issues like immigration. But we've got to continue to be able to find ways to be able to get the things done that need to be done for the nation. God bless you. Keep praying for the nation. As I tell people all the time, this is not the time to be pessimistic. This is the time to be able to pray and get to work.
Good evening. As we consider President Biden's State of the Union address, I think we should consider what we expect from the federal government and how the president and his administration are not meeting those expectations at all. There are solid reasons why more than 40% of Americans say they are worse off today than when President Biden took office, and why more than 70% of Americans believe the nation is on the wrong track. Despite the president's telling, I believe the concerns felt by many Mississippians and their fellow Americans are rooted in whether we feel secure in our homes, in our communities, in our futures, and as a nation. Let's consider. Do we feel secure when we see our strong military subjected to political correctness as our adversaries grow emboldened enough to float a spy balloon across the country? Do we feel secure when we're forced to ask tyrants in Iran, Venezuela, and elsewhere for oil while our strategic petroleum reserve is sapped and American energy production is restricted. Do we feel secure when we see U.S. border security fail, resulting in more than 4.6 million illegal border crossings in just 2 years and record levels of fentanyl crossing across the border and into our communities? Do we feel secure when we see law enforcement diminish while violent crime rates escalate from coast to coast? As we deal with our everyday lives, do we feel secure as inflation, fueled by runaway federal spending, wipes out wage gains for 22 straight months, stretching our paychecks and eroding our savings? Given all that, the President surely understands why so many Americans don't feel secure. At the start of his term 2 years ago, President Biden promised to unite American people, a noble goal. In order to achieve that, I believe it's imperative that he adjust his outlook, abandon his my way or the highway governing style, and truly work with us to turn the country around and restore a sense of security that we expect as citizens of this great nation. Thank you, and God bless America.
Good evening. I'm Katie Britt, and I have the honor of serving the great state of Alabama and the United States Senate. Watching President Biden's State of the Union address, I was listening to his remarks, not just as a senator, but as a mom of 2 school-age kids. Tonight, I am disappointed to say that the perspective of Alabama parents and families, well, that was missing. The reality of what moms and dads across our state and nation are facing is a stark difference from what we heard tonight from the president. Parents and families are sitting around the kitchen table worrying about how they're going to make ends meet in the face of crushing inflation. They're worried about the price of groceries, so from eggs to milk, from flour to chicken. They're worried about the wave of supply chain shortages that have affected their children recently. That's everything from baby formula to children's Tylenol. I don't have to guess about what parents are facing under this administration. I'm living it every day, and I'm hearing from my fellow moms and dads about their own unique experiences. Whether it's from my walking group at 5:15 in the mornings, or whether at the kids' basketball games or volleyball games, parents are telling me enough is enough, and I couldn't agree more. Parents want to stop the wasteful spending that continues to pour fuel on this fire. We want our children to be educated, not indoctrinated. We want our children to live in safe and strong communities. And we want our state and our nation to be a place where our children want to raise their children long into the future. There's no doubt that here in Alabama and across America, parents have gotten off the sidelines. We've stepped up to fight for what we believe in. I truly believe that a new generation of parents are looking across America, and we're not recognizing the country we grew up in and wasn't so long ago. We're hungry for change, but we also know that we need to be the change we want to see. We have far too many politicians in Washington who only want to gripe about problems while doing nothing to solve them. And that's why Alabama has sent a mom to the U.S. Senate to actually get things done. There's no doubt that one of our biggest challenges our nation faces is the unprecedented humanitarian and national security crisis at the border. I have visited the border twice now in my first month in office. I have listened, I have learned, visiting with our brave Border Patrol agents, law enforcement officers, survivors of human trafficking, and military personnel who are confronting this disaster on a daily basis. What I can tell you is that now it's time for action. This week, I'll be introducing a package of bills to seal and secure our border to keep hard-working Americans and families safe. My Senate Republican colleagues and I are fighting every day for faith, family, and freedom. There's no doubt that this issue should be a bipartisan one. The solutions, certainly, but even acknowledging that there is a problem. President Biden refused to own the border crisis in tonight's State of the Union, just as he has done his entire presidency. I urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to step up and join us in advancing common sense solutions to secure our border. This is about the safety and well-being of our children. It's about giving them an opportunity for their American dream. Parents and families know best, and the state of our union is strong when parents and families are strong. It's time for the President and Congress to listen, to learn, and then to take real action. Together we can build, and we must, a bright future for generations to come. So please join me in continuing to pray for our nation. It is certainly an honor to serve you. Thank you, and God bless.
Americans saw tonight just how disconnected the Biden administration is from the concerns of ordinary families. President Biden's priorities do not align with us. Republicans know that. That's why we're working to address issues that Americans care about. We're working to address the debt crisis. We're working to ensure that flood insurance remains affordable. And, by the way, we're able to rebuild crumbling infrastructure such as roads and bridges. The Republican leadership delivers results. 2 years of President Biden's leadership has only delivered disaster after disaster.
Good evening, Lloyd Smucker here. I just came from Biden's State of the Union address, and I've been through about half a dozen of these now. And what I want to hear is something visionary, something that inspires the American people, provides a call to action, provides a vision for the country. And unfortunately, I don't think we heard that tonight. It felt to me like a speech of talking points, and perhaps the only thing big about the speech tonight was just looking to big government for the answer. I think that's one of the contrasts with this administration and with our policies as Republicans. They believe in government being the answer to all of our problems. We believe in the spirit, the ingenuity of the American people to solve our problems together. Tonight, we heard statements about our economy that were completely out of touch with what I've been hearing from people all across our district, what people are experiencing in our communities. He tried to sugarcoat the reality of the economy. American people are struggling because of the policies of this administration. His spending policies caused inflation, still at nearly 40-year highs. Energy prices are straining because of his policies. What we didn't hear Biden say tonight is that we should unleash American energy dominance to lower our energy prices. Instead, he patted himself on the back talking about tax credits for electric vehicles. You know, if Biden is serious about addressing immigration, addressing the national debt, addressing our crisis at the southern border, House Republicans would be ready to work with him. But we know the policies of the past 2 years have proven that he really isn't serious about addressing these issues, and we haven't heard anything tonight that shows that's going to change.
So that was President Biden's State of the Union that I just came out of, a long hour-and-a-half speech. So it was good. He said a lot of good things about veterans, about law enforcement, but it was supposed to be a unifying speech, and I didn't hear anything that was unifying for Americans. In fact, it was, if anything, it divided people more and caused more partisan division, as you probably heard in some of the comments by some of the members during the speech. Talked about how great the economy is and how many jobs have been created. Well, if you go down any main street of any town in Washington State or around the country, talk to people, you'll understand that people are not feeling confident about the economy with increasing prices and so many different things, and everything, from housing and food and energy, all of the things that Americans have to buy every single day, becoming harder and harder to purchase. And so all these jobs that are being created, that's because we're recovering from the COVID pandemic. We've lost a tremendous number of jobs over the last couple of years. A lot of people have left the workforce, are not looking for jobs anymore. I just think he's off base by saying how great the economy is, because it's just not true. The fentanyl issue, talked a lot about the scourge of fentanyl. He's absolutely right. It's killing so many Americans. It's a difficult problem, but there's a simple solution to part of it, and that is doing a better job of closing southern border, stopping the illegal importation of this deadly drug. That would go so far into helping stop the scourge that all of our communities are facing around the country. And they went for an hour and a half talking about all these things. One thing that's on everybody's mind was the latest incident that we had of an incursion in the United States airspace of the Chinese balloon. He said we've been tested by the Chinese, tested by all of the conflicts, and that we've come out stronger. I don't think that that's true. I think by allowing this Chinese military balloon to go across United States airspace for almost a week without doing anything about it proved one thing to me, that we're weaker, that if we demonstrated to China what our reaction would be in the case of an invasion, and it would be the inability to make a decision. And that to me is not a signal of strength, it's a signal of weakness, that we failed the test that the Chinese gave to us. So overall, like I said, there's good things certainly that he pointed out, some of the human tragedies that we face in this country, and how Americans are strong because they've been able to overcome them. A lot of good stories that way, but overall we have a huge challenge in front of us. We all want to be successful as Americans, and I just hope that we can work together with the Democrats, with the president, to improve all of these different areas that we have challenges in. I didn't see the leadership there, or the unification there that we need as a country, but we'll continue to fight as hard as we can to make sure that America does come out of this stronger, better. The American people can feel more confident.
Hey everyone, Bill Huizenga here in, obviously, Washington. Just got done listening to Joe Biden in his second State of the Union address. Had a series of media interviews that were going on. But I wanted to take a moment and do a Facebook Live, and also, before I get into my views and sort of my take on what the president's speech was about tonight, thought I'd introduce you to my guest who I asked to come. Each member of Congress gets one ticket for the gallery, and I asked Andy Dominiani from Channel 3 in here. Step this way so we can get the dome in there. Andy is the anchor. Tell them a little bit about what you do at Channel 3 for people that necessarily aren't in on the Kalamazoo media market.
Who may be watching the wrong channel even in our market.
And there, it's always selling, always on message. That's good.
There's only one good channel. Yeah, but I'm the evening anchor, and I also do a lot of political reporting, so I was honored that Bill asked me to come. And Bill is a new, not new to Congress, of course, but new to us in Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, which is the majority of our viewership. So we wanted to let folks know how Bill operates, what makes him tick, what he thinks. So I watched you watch the speech. I watched when you clapped. I watched when you stood up, and you're a gentleman. You were very.
I didn't know I was being watched the whole time like this.
You should have known. Who'd you invite?
Yeah, I guess. Well, C-SPAN's now got roaming cameras too, so it's a little more freewheeling. But yeah. So here's my opportunity to interview the interviewer.
Okay.
All right. So your first State of the Union. Had you seen Joe Biden in person before?
I have seen him before. He's been to Grand Rapids a couple of times when he was not only vice president but also running.
Yeah. So now this is a little different. Obviously, the security, everybody is here, right? Supreme Court justices, the military brass, all the senators. We don't know who. I don't know who the designated survivor was that wasn't here. But
I tried to see
everybody's here.
What cabinet member was
yeah.
because it was surreal, Bill. And,
so what was it like?
You're used to all this, but for me, it was very exciting because all the newsmakers are in one room. Here's, of course, the president, vice president, Speaker McCarthy. Oh, there's Nancy Pelosi down there. Oh, here's Marjorie Taylor Greene, and there's AOC, and they're in a feud. Here's every Supreme Court justice. Here's Pete Buttigieg. Here's the former governor of Michigan, now Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. And they all are just right there, like you're watching TV.
And Bono.
That was weird, too. Yeah. And he didn't mention Bono. President Biden didn't mention him during the speech, but Bono was there. So yeah, I appreciate the invite. And Joe Biden right over here,
yeah.
It was neat.
Well, and look, this is, I know, an opportunity for you to get out here and interview other lawmakers and other folks, and you're going to be going live tomorrow, I understand, with some other Michigan folks.
We're going to be live from our Sinclair Bureau. We've interviewed you, of course, and we also interviewed Hillary Scholten, who's a freshman congresswoman, a Democrat from the Grand Rapids area. You know, I can't buy Bill, he can't buy me, so you know we got to be fair, and we will be fair. And I think you two actually agree on a lot. You know, I think she's someone who will be easy to work with.
Maybe he was tracking how many times she stood up.
She
stood up a lot more in this speech than I
think
did.
So, but she was sitting with John James.
Yeah.
And he's a Republican representing Michigan. So she's told me she's going to be reaching across the aisle to you for me. So okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Andy, I'm glad you could come. Glad that worked out. Thank you, Sinclair, for sending him and allowing this to happen and making sure that happened, because I think it is better for everybody to really, and for you all as those that report what's going on, to have more of an understanding and idea, even just sort of the behind the scenes stuff of what we have to go through to physically make all of it happen. And there's a lot of effort that happens from staff at all levels, House, Senate, you know, the administrative staff here at the House, the White House, everybody to pull something like this off.
There's a lot more chaos behind the scenes than I thought. A lot more chaos
like most things in life.
We were like most things. We were running.
Yes, we were running.
You were running.
Yeah, I think this is
your guy Boomer running.
Yeah.
Running.
Yes. Hi, Boomer.
Lexi running.
So, all right.
Well,
thanks, Andy. And so now my reaction to what we saw. So. And if you're seeing any of the local media coverage, and I think I'm doing 4 radio ads, or not radio ads, but interviews tomorrow morning. Look, we'll see what Joe Biden does. Frankly, he is in a similar situation that President Obama was in when I got elected in 2010. Republican majority comes into the House. President Obama at the time talked about kind of a new start and working together and that kind of thing, and then it didn't really turn out that way. He had pushed ahead too far, too fast in most people's eyes with Obamacare and a number of other things that had gone on. So now the question will be, what does Joe Biden do? Does he actually pivot? Does he actually look for bipartisan solutions on immigration, which is what he had talked about? You know, what does that mean? You know, he talked about a unity agenda, but frankly then went after Republicans erroneously and wrong, saying Republicans wanted to end Social Security and Medicare. And he got a very vocal and frankly uncharacteristic to most State of the Unions, but it was wide and rightfully so, a wide response. Very negative and very strong at pushing back on that. And so when he was saying, well, maybe that's now off the table, I hope so. Now, my guess is the DCCC and the political arm isn't going to take it off the table. That's still going to be the line of attack. But the simple fact is, folks, anybody who's watching this, any of those seniors that are in the programs right now and that are in dire need of that safety net, they're going to be protected. That system is going to be there. We have a social and moral obligation to do so. We can't change it on them. Now, me at 54, or my kids, ages 25 down to 16, they're going to have some time to adjust, because guess what? If we don't adjust the program isn't going to survive. And that's not me saying this. These are the folks that actually run the programs, the actuaries, because it's all math. This isn't politics, it's math. And the simple fact is there is going to be significant cuts that are going to automatically be made into these programs in the near future if we don't do something about them and have the courage to have the conversation. So that's got to be on the table as we're having this conversation as a nation. You know, I thought, frankly, the president's overly rosy and optimistic view of the economy just doesn't fit with what most people are feeling in their bones or in their pocketbooks and checkbooks. And when they're trying to put food on the table and fuel in the minivan and a roof over their head, everyone knows that the inflation that has just been running rampant is crushing them. And one study reports that the average family is now spending $10,000 more per year on the basics than they did just 2 years ago. And that's devastating. That's devastating for the middle income families. So we've got to get serious about what's going on with inflation. And you know, a lot of my Democrat colleagues think that the answer is spending. We just got to spend more. And it's the exact opposite of that, because that is just adding inflationary fuel to the fire, and that we can't do that. So we'll have a lot more that we're going to be saying. Tune into the local radio. You can tune in to huizenga.house.gov, sign up for the Huizenga Huddle. We have lots of links and things, and we'll make sure that you're well informed, and appreciate everybody who is on there. And this is the beginning. We'll see over the next 2 years. I should say we're getting ramped up. I'm the new chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee for Financial Services. I'm going to have direct input into everything from the Securities and Exchange Commission and what they've been doing, to the accounting standards, to the CFPB, and that directly ties into car loans and all kinds of other things. So we're going to be digging around on a lot. This administration has not had any, frankly, oversight over the last 2 years, and that's going to be changing. So we're looking forward to that. So stay in touch. We'll talk to you soon.
For the past 2 years, hardworking Hoosier families in southern and west central Indiana have paid the price of President Biden's failed leadership. During his time in office, we have seen the price of gas skyrocket, the cost of everyday goods and services continue to climb, and Hoosiers' utility bills rise nearly 43% above 2021 rates. As your voice in Washington, I'm here to say that Indiana's families, farmers, and businesses deserve better than the hand that President Biden and House and Senate Democrats have dealt them. As Republicans take back the House in the 118th Congress, we've hit the ground running. We're ready to work to fulfill our commitment to America and build back an economy that's strong, a nation that's safe, a future that's built on freedom, and a government that's accountable. During our first month in the majority, we have passed critical legislation to rescind the nearly 87,000 new agents President Biden was planning on adding to the IRS, defend our nation's energy security, protect the sanctity of life, and hold the Biden administration accountable for their weaponization of the federal government. The best part is, we're just getting started. I look forward to continuing to work with my fellow Republican colleagues to fight for the issues that matter most to Hoosiers in Indiana's 8th Congressional District.
Bice here, and I was so excited to have my friend and Sheriff of Oklahoma County, Tommy Johnson, here with me tonight for the State of the Union address. President Joe Biden comes to Congress once a year to give us an update, and I was honored to be able to bring a guest finally this first time, and Sheriff was my guest. Sheriff, what were your thoughts about the evening?
I just think, regardless of your political affiliation, the ability to come and experience this union is something that I think transcends anything that I've experienced in my lifetime. I mean, to see people engage and disagree and agree on topics, that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And to have it happen here, I think is truly special, and something I think is special to take part in. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thrilled to have you. It was a long speech, almost 90 minutes, and a lot of topics covered. Certainly a couple of things that weren't covered that I thought should have been. The southern border was sort of touched on with the fentanyl discussion, but really the president made the comment that it's up to Congress to fix it. That's not really accurate. Secretary Murkowski has abdicated his responsibilities at the border, and I'd like to see him actually try to resolve that issue. We've had 4.5 million illegal crossings over the last 2 years, and the fentanyl crisis is raging because of that. We also really didn't hear the president talk about China, and he briefly mentioned it, but with the surveillance balloon that traversed the entire continental United States, I think it's time that we really step up and start addressing our adversaries, and certainly China's at the top of that list. So I want to say thank you again to Sheriff for joining me tonight, and hope to see you all back home soon.
Hi, Mike Rounds here. Had the opportunity this evening to attend the President's address to the nation. This is the State of the Nation, and it's the one that basically we come in, we sit down, and there's a whole lot of sitting down and standing up, Republicans sometimes, Democrats a lot, as the President gives his message about the State of the Union. And tonight's State of the Union address came off, as a lot of people would have expected, the president touting what he thought was good, Republicans agreeing with some of it, but really disagreeing with a number of different areas, and that's kind of what makes it interesting. Tonight, the president said that he wanted to move towards curing cancer. There's a whole lot of us that have personal interest in that and want to see that move forward, and I think he's going to find good agreement on that. He talked about trying to rein in some of the big tech companies. He talked about the fact that they're not good for America and that he thought we ought to have some way to regulate some of their activity. I think he's going to have good success across the board on some of those goals. There were some other areas in which I think he's going to have some real problems and some disagreements. First of all, he did not talk very well about the things that he wants to do to fix the economy. In fact, he suggested that the economy was in really good shape. Yet for people in South Dakota, $747 more a month in living expenses than when he took office. Gas prices in our part of the country are up 37%. Natural gas is up 47%. Electricity is up 21%. He didn't address those, and he seems to think that he's moving in the right direction. We disagree. He said he wants to have an assault weapons ban. We disagree, and we think the biggest challenge he's going to have there is actually trying to define what an assault weapon is. What he's really talking about is more restrictions on guns in terms of law-abiding citizens, people that would actually obey a law. So we do have some real serious problems with that. We also thought that he would delve a little bit more into China and what they're trying to do. We also thought he might talk a little bit more about the challenges at the border. Several times during this particular event, people actually just were starting to kind of yell out that, close the border, fix the border. And, he talked about fentanyl coming across. It's coming through from China into Mexico because it's easy to get across the border into the United States. We've got to fix the border. We need an administration that understands that. This one clearly does not. So we've got some challenges. There were some good parts to the speech tonight in which we can agree on. There were some other areas that really point out the difference between this administration, which seems to truly believe in socialism, and a lot of us who believe that capitalism is definitely the way to go.
So we just wrapped up the State of the Union address delivered by President Biden. It was a message of optimism from the president. He spoke about bipartisan accomplishments, and there certainly have been significant bipartisan accomplishments. I have been part of them, certainly the infrastructure bill that we passed into law last year, which was very, very significant for the state of Alaska, delivering great benefits, and it's something that I'm proud of, and I think that the president should be proud of as well. There were other measures, the PACT Act, which is going to help our veterans that have been exposed to toxic chemicals. So there was good work. But I think in fairness that the president struck a note of optimism that Alaskans are certainly not feeling. I'm hearing from Alaskans that are concerned about the continued price of inflation, what they're paying for fuel, what they're paying in the grocery store, the fact that they cannot get eggs. The reality is that it is still a very, very tough economy. We're worried about a recession in the state of Alaska. So this optimism, this rosy glow that all is fine. When we talk about the State of the Union, the president is right, is good because of the soul of the American people. But it's not good right now in the sense of a healthy economy. We've got a ways to go. The president spoke about different measures that he is going to push. Buy in America. I am all over Buy in America, but boy, you couldn't point to a better place to do that when you're talking about resources in our ground with American workers, our jobs, our resources, our benefit. We've got a project that is ready-made, the Willow Project in the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska. Mr. President, do the right thing and approve that project so that it gets Alaskans to work. It helps our Native people who live in that region. It helps our state, it helps our country, and it helps our allies. That's made in America. That's Buy America. So there's some things that we can work on. I'm all about bipartisanship. It goes both ways. We can make this happen, but it has to be more than just words. It has to be that full-on action. So we've got a new Congress ahead of us. I'm looking forward to a lot of good work. We're going to do it together because that's how you benefit Alaskans. But it has to be going both ways. So
families all across Wyoming have had enough of President Biden's blame game. Tonight we heard this president brag and boast about a record that is failing the hardworking men and women of our state. This president is causing crisis after crisis. Yet President Biden didn't talk about these crises tonight. He ignored the pain and suffering of families across the nation. President Biden wants Americans to forget that his out-of-touch policies pushed prices to a 40-year high, crushed Wyoming energy production, and caused the worst border crisis in our nation's history. Instead, he read empty words off of a teleprompter when struggling families need real solutions. Unlike Joe Biden and the Democrats, Senate Republicans are focused on fighting for Wyoming families and for every American. We're working to stop his reckless spending, make life more affordable, unleash Wyoming energy, and secure the border. It's time for Joe Biden to work with us to help Americans recover from the nightmare that he has caused.
In the last 2 years, Democrats used their total control of Washington to pursue a partisan agenda that sharply increased costs on families, weakened our energy independence, and undermined our national security at the southern border and abroad. Thankfully, with a new Republican majority in the House of Representatives, Congress can now block the worst impulses of the Biden administration and its far-left allies. The reality of a divided government means that compromise will be required in order to address the many challenges facing our country. I'm optimistic that members of both parties can come together to bolster our energy security, create new opportunities for farmers and ranchers, increase transparency and accountability in big tech, and prioritize our most important responsibility, the safety and security of the American people. To achieve these goals, congressional Republicans are ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work. We hope President Biden will join us.
Well, I don't know what the president set out to do tonight, but if it was to unify the country, he failed miserably. There's very little unifying language. In fact, it seems to me that his perception of unity is we all think like him. That's unity in his mind, as opposed to finding common ground, meeting in the middle, compromising on things. I guess I was hoping for a lot more and just found myself being very disappointed. Not surprising that it was not only was it not a unifying speech, it was a very divisive speech. And he used divisive language. He used a divisive tone. He did that whole "I'm a tough guy" thing. That's so I don't know. It's just very unattractive. And I hope that reality tomorrow when he wakes up and Kevin McCarthy brings him some proposals for how to both raise the debt ceiling and impose some savings on our taxpayers. I hope that he takes it seriously and realizes it's no longer a monarchy. He doesn't have total control, and nor do Democrats. So, but all in all, tonight was a big fat F in my book for this president's speech.
While the president may have talked a good game tonight, his record shows that he's failed to deliver for the American people. President Biden has failed on the economy, and North Carolina families have been paying the price. Faced with sticker shock at the grocery store and at the gas pump, families have responded by making the tough decisions. They've been setting priorities and cutting back in order to live within their budgets. Unfortunately, President Biden and the Democrats have done the complete opposite. They've been reckless and irresponsible. They've wasted trillions on left-wing priorities that have made inflation even worse. We cannot continue the current trajectory. We need to get spending under control, and we need to open up domestic energy production to get energy prices down. President Biden also failed when it comes to one of our government's most basic responsibilities, securing the border. I saw this crisis firsthand just a couple of weeks ago, and it's even worse than you can imagine. Our brave Border Patrol agents are overworked, overwhelmed, and underappreciated by the Biden administration. We need new leadership that must start with a new DHS secretary who will actually enforce our laws and work with Congress to secure the border. I've demonstrated that I'm willing to work with any president on solutions that are good for North Carolina, but I will also oppose any president when the policies they put forth are bad for us. America faces monumental challenges, and we can't afford more bad policies from this administration. I hope President Biden will accept the reality that America is in need of a new direction, and I hope he will work across the aisle in good faith to get our country back on track.